and PBS TV stations and both TV satellite networks on Dish Network Channel 9415 Free Speech TV, 9410 Link TV, DirecTV Channel 375, and we're video and audio podcasting at democracynow.org. Our headlines are also available in Spanish for any radio station to take in both audio and transcript form. I'm Amy Goodman as we turn now to a new study from the Center for Public Integrity that's revealed President Bush and top administration officials made a total of 935 false statements about Iraq's alleged national security threat in the 2 years following the 9/11 attacks. President Bush made the most false statements, 260. Colin Powell, his then Secretary of State, made 254 false statements. The authors of the study conclude, quote, the cumulative effect of these false statements, amplified by thousands of news stories and broadcasts, was massive, with the media coverage creating an almost impenetrable din for several critical months in the run-up to war. On October 7, 2002, for example, Bush repeatedly lied about the threat posed by Iraq in a prime-time speech in Cincinnati, Ohio.
The Iraqi regime has violated all of those obligations. It possesses and produces chemical and biological weapons. It is seeking nuclear weapons. It has given shelter and support to terrorism and practices terror against its own people. If we know Saddam Hussein has dangerous weapons today, and we do, does it make any sense for the world to wait to confront him as he grows even stronger and develops even more dangerous weapons? We know that Iraq and the al-Qaeda terrorist network share a common enemy, the United States of America. We know that Iraq and al-Qaeda have had high-level contacts that go back a decade.
President Bush speaking October 7th, 2002. Well, Charles Lewis joins us now from Washington, founder of the Center for Public Integrity. He created and directed the study called Iraq, the War Card. He is the president of the Fund for Independence in Journalism in Washington. Welcome to Democracy Now!, Chuck Lewis.
Oh, thanks. Nice to be here.
Tell us about these findings.
Well, we wanted to just look, now that we know, really since at least 2005, there have been a number of government reports, obviously, that there were no weapons of mass destruction, that there were no meaningful links between al-Qaeda and Saddam Hussein in Iraq. Now that that's been firmly established, we wanted to see how often this was this message was put out there, and who said it the most, and also when was it said, and where was it said, how many venues. In other words, how did we get from this not being true to it being a war, and what happened there? So we systematically, and I do mean systematically, we took a 2-year period from September 11th forward, and we tracked 8 officials, the folks you mentioned, and altogether, including 2 White House press secretaries, Paul Wolfowitz, Donald Rumsfeld, Condoleezza Rice, and the president and the vice president, and Colin Powell. We looked at all their statements, and we wanted to, we also interlaced various fine and wonderful journalistic accounts like Bob Drogan's and others. We looked at government reports, Senate Intelligence Committee reports, the Delphi report, you name it, we have all those reports in there. We have whistleblower accounts, the most credible ones, Richard Clark, of course, and many others. And we wove that into the chronology, so you know what they're saying at the time, and you know what privately they are actually discussing and hearing and thinking behind the scenes, and it's very useful because then you get to put it all in context.
Well, explain that.
This is basically a historic record.
Chuck, explain that, what they knew behind the scenes and what they were saying publicly, because in that case, aren't you talking about lies? I am talking about them choosing certain information over other information. We know that within 24 hours of 9/11, of course, from Richard Clark's account, that the president wanted to go into Iraq, and then within a few days, the government begins the war planning process for Iraq, and they also acknowledge they don't have the evidence, and so they decide to focus attention on Afghanistan. I know all this is known to many of your listeners and viewers, but the public has never really seen all this woven together. Most people don't read this. We felt it was useful for the public to know. What is unclear is the process inside the White House where this campaign, how this campaign was orchestrated. As you know, millions of emails
from the White House may now apparently have been destroyed. And there's not been any hearings so far about the process in the White House, about what they knew and when they knew it and what they thought and what they were saying. I mean, this is not, this is a beginning step, in my view at least, to creating a historic record for posterity that'll be a working document. And every new thing that comes out, like Scott McClellan's book in a couple of months, where he apparently says he was lied to by the president and the vice president on the Valerie Plame matter, as these things start to tumble out, we're going to start to understand better what occurred in the White House. Maybe the Senate Intelligence Committee can shed light on that in a few months when they have hearings about their long-awaited report. But you know, we just laid out what we called false information. It was simply not, there was no basis in fact. It was erroneous. We did not interview any of these people, and we don't have access to internal communications that they had. And as you know, Karl Rove, they also had a separate email system through the Republican Party, which is not accessible. So until those things emerge, you know, I'm a records guy, and right now the record, to make blunt, you know, assertions, it certainly does. When you make 935 false statements, obviously that's strains credulity, to put it charitably. Yes, it does. But did some people actually believe this? In other words, ethicists who are experts on lying do make a distinction between, it doesn't mean it's any less morally offensive or tragic. What it means is, did they consciously say, today I'm going to go out and lie some more today, or do they believe it down to their toes, and if you gave them a polygraph they would pass? What we don't know is which of the 8, where did this come from exactly? I mean, I think we all have some ideas what that might be, but we actually don't know.
Chuck Lewis, White House Press Secretary Dana Perino was asked about your study on Wednesday.
You mentioned that the study out from the Center for Public Integrity and the Fund for Independence in Journalism, where they did what they called a count of hundreds of false statements made by the president and top administration officials regarding the threat posed by Iraq. And they counted during the 2 years after 9/11.
I hardly think that this study is worth spending any time on. It is so flawed in terms of taking anything into context or including, they only looked at members of the administration rather than looking at members of Congress or people around the world, because, as you'll remember, we were part of a broad coalition of countries that deposed a dictator based on a collective understanding of the intelligence.
Chuck Lewis, your response.
Well, you know, just to make an observation, this is the press secretary who didn't know about the Cuban Missile Crisis until a few months ago.
Explain.
Well, she made a reference that she actually didn't know about the Cuban Missile Crisis back in the 60s. For a White House press secretary to say that is astonishing to me. So anyway, her comment is, of course, predictable. At least she didn't call this a third-rate burglary. If my administration, that I'm the flak for, made 935 false statements, I would want to say, go do another study and take 10 years and look at the world in Congress. Fact is, the world was rallied, as was the compliant Congress, into doing exactly what the administration wanted. And the bottom line is, she didn't say that there were not false statements. Basically, they acknowledged there were false statements without her saying it. They have essentially said, gosh, I guess there weren't any WMDs in Iraq. In other statements they've made, it's all bad intelligence. Well, the fact is we did provide context, 400,000 words of context, weaving in all of this material, not just what they said at the time, but what has transpired and what has tumbled out factually in the subsequent 6 years. So we actually have as much context so far as anyone has provided in one place. It's searchable for all citizens in the world. And for Congress and others that want to deal with this from here on. But her comment is slightly laughable. I mean, that she didn't really address it, of course, and she's going to really have an interesting time in a couple months.
Chuck Lewis, I want to keep you with us, but as we continue to talk about the lies that led up to the Iraq War, we're joined by Los Angeles Times reporter Bob Drogan, who's author of the new book, Curveball: Spies, Lies, and the Con Man Who Caused a War. The book examines how a former Iraqi taxi driver helped build the Bush administration's case for war by making false claims about Saddam Hussein's alleged biological and chemical weapons programs. Welcome to Democracy Now!, Bob Drogan.
Thank you.
It's good to have you back.